Hello and welcome to part 4 of this Nanobench tutorial. And here in this video, we're going to look into the most powerful or maybe most exciting feature of Nanobench, which is templating. So we've already seen that on this Publish tab, there's a number of links, and each of them leads to a form generated by a template. For example, today we could look at defining a new individual, which allows us to introduce a new thing and assign it to a class, such as here, right? We could search. What we did last time was searching for video, and we see actually the class introduced last time, Nanobench tutorial video. So I could now here introduce a new video as an instance of this, or I could choose anything else, right? So this is Wikidata behind, so it's very general and comprehensive. So for example, I could say something as a country, and like that, introduce this thing and give it an identifier, etc. Now, if you click on this icon here, as I showed quickly last time, you're going to see that the template itself is also an application. And you could go here and say edit as derived application, for example. And then you'd see that this is now actually used to fill in the same kind of template. So in such a template, you can create a template. So that's a kind of a template. And if you go here to publish, you actually see also here this section templates, where you have a template for an assertion template, for a provenance template, and for a publication info template, right? So these are the blue, red, and yellow parts respectively. And if you click on one, then you have just a blank template to fill in, which might look a bit daunting because it's so long and so many things to fill in, but we're going to go through it. So I can now show you what the different parts mean. So I think it's easiest if you have this filled in or a filled in example, such as this one about defining a new individual. So when you go about and fill in such a template to define a new template, that's how you can work through that from top to bottom. So first you should give it a label, right? That's the one that then also shows up in this list. Next, optionally, you can give it a tag. It's just a simple string, and it's a very basic first way of grouping them together, because that determines where it will show up under which section here. And if you don't give it any, it will just show up under other. So that's easy. Then this one is a small feature that you can make it an unlisted template. So with that, it won't show up here. So people will only find out about it if you share, for example, this URI that you see up here, this URL. If you share that, they'll be pointed to this view if they have Nanobench installed as well. But otherwise, they'll not find it in the list. For some cases, you might want to have that, but here we probably don't. Then you can state the default provenance. So if you go here to any of these, right, such as retracting an application, you'll see the default provenance is always attributed to myself, unless you change it manually. Or let's say if you want to say attributed to somebody else, then you see here, if you go here and copy this link here, you have the URI of this provenance template, and you could then add it here as default provenance and will be shown instead. The user can still change it, but the default will be different, which can be helpful. Here you can also state that there are required pub info fields. So here the default is always, the default that you cannot really change is that there is this one entry that points an application to yourself because you're creating it. And in contrast to assertion and provenance, you can have multiple pub info templates filled. You, for example, say it's also an example, and there are additional nanopub creators, etc. If you want to have one of these, for example, you want to make a template with which you can only publish example nanopublications, then you can again go here, copy this URI. So this part is not yet as user-friendly, right, that you have to copy-paste URIs around. So, but that part of the interface still can still have some improvements. But right, if you know what you're doing, it's quite easy to define here that a publication info event is shown by default and actually cannot be removed. So whenever somebody is using your template, and they have to use that. And so you can, for example, then state that there has to be it has to be an example nano publication. Now these I'm going to close this one. These publication info templates and provenance templates, they behave exactly the same or almost exactly the same as assertion templates. So you can also define your own provenance templates and your own publication info templates. I'm not going to show this here. We're only going to focus on assertion templates, but it's not much different at all. So now the core part of the template are the statements, right? So this should have been fairly clear if maybe we want to go to the same example again that we started with, defining a new individual, that these 4 lines in this blue part in this form, they correspond to 4 triples. Well, or just 3 because the last one is optional, right? Depending on whether you fill it in or not. Now, what's also pretty clear, I hope, is that they have this kind of subject, predicate, object structure, right? So that's what makes them triples. But we normally don't show the URI, but we actually show a label that you can also define in a template, or if it's something to be filled in, if it's a placeholder, we show a text field or another kind of user interface component for the user to select or choose. So that's what you define in this part. So this is a group of statements that you can repeat. So here you can press the plus icon to have more of them, right? Initially, you only have 1 and you can make more. And each of them corresponds to a statement. So because we have here these 4 lines, right? So we have 4 statements here. We name them as ST0, ST1, ST2, ST3. It doesn't really matter. It helps if you name them in such a way with the numbering that if they're sorted, they show up in the way you want to have them. This avoids that you have to later manually define in what order they should appear. In any case, for each of them, you have to say what subject, predicate, and object they have. So in this case, you have as predicate RDF type. So that's how you state that an individual belongs to a class. And now subject and object, you have just these placeholders that either become then text fields or drop-down menus in the interface over here, or they can also, in other cases, be placeholders for URIs that are minted, but where the user has no control over what they will look like, depending on what we fill in below. So for a start, we just, whenever we don't put a full URI, then these are kind of placeholders that we have to specify later how they're going to be filled in. But if you use the same placeholder name here and here, right, this refers to the same thing. You can see them a bit like blank notes. They're not technical blank notes, but they behave very much in the same way. They get columnized in the end, so they're not technical blank notes. So what we're saying here, the first subject has something individual, so a placeholder individual, a subject, then a predicate, and then a class. And you see all the statements in this case have the same subject. That's kind of a common pattern, but it doesn't have to be like that. It's also reflected by when we type something here, right? It's automatically filled into all of them because the system knows it's all the same thing. And then the predicates are in this case always given. That also doesn't need to be like that. So also they can be text fields and drop-down menus and all the other things. But in this case, they are all fixed. So in that case, we just put directly the URI, right? So we have here RDFS label and DC terms description and RDFS-C also. But you can paste in any URI from any schema you would like to use. And then we have a name as the object here, description, and C also link. So obviously, these are just names of placeholders, and we have to specify further below more what they mean. The first thing you have to do, though, before we can do that is here. Again, this is something you can repeat. We have to specify which of these statements above actually are included directly in the assertion. And the assertion is equal to the assertion template. And this might seem a bit redundant, but the point here is when you have a grouped statement, on which we don't have here, but you could have a grouped statement. You say, okay, statement 4 is a grouped statement. And then you could select here statement 4 and say what it includes as a group statement, right? And in that case, if let's say 1 and 2 were grouped together, you'd have to remove them from above here, right? You'd have to remove them here and here. I don't want to do that now, but oh yeah, now it's correct again. But that's how you would define group statements. So, and if you want to delete that one, you just delete the content, and here also you just make it empty again. So then it's considered as not filled. Now, why you do grouped statements? There are two reasons for that. One is if you want to make a group of statements optional. So that's what we're going to do down here to mark something optional. Right here, you have just one statement. So then you don't need to group it. It's just one statement, you mark it optional. But sometimes you want to have several statements together as optional, in the sense that either the user has to fill them in all together or nothing at all. So it's kind of the whole group that is either on or off. That's how you can use the grouping. Plus, the other way, the other reason why you might need grouping is when you have to want to have repeated statements. We also don't have it here, but we but we do actually see it here in this template, right? So here, these 3 are grouped together, so you can kind of repeat them together, and as such, the grouping, yeah, that's how the grouping works. They can also be together, so you can have grouped, so they can be repeatable and optional. And that's what you do down here, right? For all the statements, or no, for the statements where you, for the statements where it's important, sorry, let me start again. The simple statements, that means basically they're neither optional nor repeated. You don't actually need to specify that. So that's kind of from a previous version, and you can if you want to, but you don't have to. All what's needed to flag is when you have optional statements or group statements, right? You could, for example, now also make this statement number 3. You could also make it a repeatable statement, right? Which might be fine, if which could be actually useful if the thing is explained at more than one place. So here you, for all the statements, you can declare whether when something is optional or repeated. But here's just statement number 3. Then this part is what, if you name the statements in a way that they align according to their order, you don't need to fill this in. But here you can, for example, could say that if you want to have statement 3 before statement 2, you could do it like that. And then you don't have to rename all the things over here, right? It's a bit more explicit, but typically it's best, yeah, you could actually delete them all here because we have named them in such a way. So if it's something optional, if you delete all the elements, then it's not filled, and so it will not be used to create an application. So in that case, it wouldn't have been necessary. So now I'm not going to actually change this one. So whatever I do, it will not have any effect, because in the end, I'm not going to press publish in this case. We're going to just do it in a different case. But that's how it works. Now, so that's where we were at, right? So here you can define a statement order value if you want to. Then, and that's important, for each of the placeholders, you need to declare what it is. So here we had the class one. So right, that's this one here. And we say it's a guided choice placeholder. That is a bit a more advanced version of, if you maybe look at the see also link, right? That's the one down here. This is now an URI placeholder. So it requires you to paste in something that is a URI, right? If you do something like that has blank spaces in it and doesn't start with HTTP : or something like that, if you try to publish it, it will actually flag it that it's not well formed, right? Now it complains about a lot of things, but that's the part here. So you can just make it a URI placeholder, but if you want to have guidance such that you can type and it suggests you something, then you need a guided choice placeholder. So that means it's guided with APIs that we'll see down here, but it doesn't restrict you. So you can still paste any URL that you want, right? It's not restricting, it's only guiding. If you want it to be restricted, there is also restricted choice placeholder. And there, further below, you have to tell it what values you accept. And then it's just a drop-down menu that doesn't do any, it does autocomplete, but it's actually a fixed list and doesn't allow you to add anything else. But sometimes or often you also have something like the name that is not a URI, right? And that's also indicated here with the quotes, right? Or you can just type anything. That's called a literal, and that's what you can do here. Now, another thing you might want to do here for the second one, description, actually, what would also be helpful is to have a long literal placeholder. In that case, it will just make the text field bigger. So that's helpful if you expect longer text. Then, so that's what you could do here for description. Now, individual is this thing over here. And what we say here first, it's we start here, a local resource. So, and on top of that, an introduced resource. So actually the introduced resource is, or the local resource is implied from an introduced resource. Local resource means it's something in the namespace of the nanopublication that will have, once published, the nanopublication URI as a prefix, and then a hash and something, right? It's basically a newly minted thing, right? So that's what we have here. It's also an introduced resource. That's just a tag that will be added in the that will be added in the publication info. Let's have a look if we can show you that quickly. If we go here, now this one, let's go. It was superseded from earlier one. I just want to see whether I have here. I have some nanopublications that use that. For example, this one, that's a concrete nanopublication based on this template. And what you see here, there is this. That's an nanopublication introduces this thing. So it's stating in the publication info part that an nanopublication is there to introduce a new thing. Right? Not all nanopublications are like that. Some just make a new statement about things that are already introduced, but some, like with this template, they are used to introduce a new thing and thereby mint a new identifier. So that's what this does. If you make introduced resource, then and you can only have one of these, then this thing will be tagged as a thing being introduced by an nanopublication. It has an effect on some of the APIs. Otherwise, it's typically just a matter of documenting. But also, in this case, we also want to make it a placeholder, meaning we allow the user, I'll close this again, to enter in a text field what the user wants to be at the end, at the suffix. Right? Because it's a local resource, the prefix part is given, only the suffix is something the user can change. If you don't add this here, then it will just use individual. It will, for all of the, it will just use the name here as the suffix part. And it will not ask the user whether he or she wants to change it. So that's the difference here. That name is also a little placeholder, and see also link, you've already looked at that. And you see there's few more things. You can, for example, say URI literal placeholder. In that case, users can do either URI or literal if they enclose it with quotes. Just URI placeholder is a special type of URI, such as the ones that contain the hash. I'm not going to that now, but yeah, that pretty much covers all the possibilities here. So with that, you tell the interface which parts are supposed to become what kind of user interface elements. Then you can state possible values. So that is for, as you see here, for restricted or guided choice placeholders. What we have here is in the class has a possible value. So that means when you click here, you see it as an option already up front, whereas you can see more when you type here, right? For the restricted choice placeholder, that's the only option. If this were a restricted choice placeholder, right, then this would have been the only option it chose. So that doesn't make too much sense, right? In that case, you probably want to add a few of these lines to allow the user to select from them. Then, well, this is another variation. If you have lots of elements in your restricted choice placeholder, you might want to load it from an existing nanopublication that contains them. so that you don't have to have like 100 elements here, but you can actually load them from somewhere else. I'm not going to be able to cover this here, but just, the possibility exists. Then for the class, we want to access some APIs for the possible values, right? So there's not a fixed list, but we access the APIs. And I'm not going to go into any details, but you can do it supports or recognizes a number of APIs. There's a bit of kind of custom code in Nanobench that handles this. But so far, I would just encourage you to just copy these values here that you can find here if you want to have the same feature to check the server network for classes defined as nanopublications. That was this one does. And also, did I change? I changed now one of them because one of them used to be the Wikidata one. Here it is. And access Wikidata. So if you want to have only Wikidata, then you only have to add this one. Then the final part here is about the labels. So all the elements, and that corresponds to both the ones that turn into UI elements as well as the ones in between, right? That are these words in between. You want to give them labels so they don't show up as the ugly URIs, but something more user-friendly. And you see here all the things that show up right from back here. In the case of the UI elements, often this corresponds then to what is shown before the thing is filled in. And for these parts here, it means what is shown to the user, except if they look at the tooltip, then they see the full URI as well. Now, so that's pretty much it, except that you can also have a prefix. For example, you could, for the see also link, if you want to say this always has to be, let's say, on GitHub. That's kind of probably a stupid requirement, but you could do it like this, and then a prefix label. So there's a small issue here that that Nanobench at the moment doesn't accept to leave such literal placeholders empty. So you need to write something here. It will not allow you to have an empty prefix label. So then you would have like the GitHub page, and then it would say it would only allow the user to enter. Well, it would basically take this one as prefix for given, and would only allow the user to enter things behind. Or what is often used is actually ORCID, org, and then user with ORCID, for example, like this. So they can only enter a URI that starts with https://orcid.org/, right? Okay, but we don't want to have this here. And then you can, on top of that, also specify regular expression. So similarly, to specify that any of the placeholders, whatever is filled in there, and that works for literals as well as URIs, that it has to follow a particular regular expression. For example, this one is the one for ORCIDs, like the numerical part of ORCIDs. So that's all the parts. If you fill them all in correctly, you can make a new template. So maybe let's try to do that based on the. Well, I would like to keep that one open first. Define new individual. So we were going to make something very similar to that. There is a new thing introduced, and we're going to use many of the same elements. And I just want to show you how you do that if you fill it in one by one. I'll do it relatively quickly, but you'll see it's kind of probably a different thing to fill it in from scratch. So let's say you want to have a template where you can introduce a new idea, let's say, or kind of describe. So here we call it defining a new individual. Maybe we call it like introducing, sounds better. Maybe with an idea, introducing a new idea. Now we could go here and check where we want it to appear. Maybe general. I don't know. It doesn't matter too much. Let's say you want to appear on the channel. It's not unlisted. We don't need these. But now here we can say, okay, we also want to have it maybe roughly the same for statements. Let's say we have statement 0. Let's stick to the same convention. And then the subject is the idea, right? And that's the same for all the subjects. We're also going to do it like that. And then we want to have something similar. So is a, so we have this RDFS type, so you can copy it out from this tooltip, or you have to find it somewhere else. So this is also a thing that needs to get better in the user interface, right? To help you better with these. So now you basically need to find it somewhere and paste it in. And then the object, so that this would be an idea, and I've now also this that I'm going to copy here. So object, so that's the identifier of Wikidata that represents idea. If I copied it correctly, yeah, it is. So I'm going to be using that. So I say this thing, that's the new thing that's going to be introduced, is an idea. Okay. Then the next sentence can do should be what it's called. So we also give it this RDF label. So we use the same year right here to represent the label. And the object is then the name of the idea, let's say. And the next one will be described as follows. So description. So we're also going to do that. Description. And then the last one, see also. See also link. We're also going to do it like that. Okay, good. Then here we need to state that the assertion includes them all, right? So that's a slightly, the part that feels maybe slightly redundant, but in case some of these statements are only part of grouped statements, then you wouldn't include them here, but we would include them down there. So, but we don't have grouped statements here, and you see here you're helped by the interface that knows what placeholders you introduced above. Good. Then we don't have any grouped statements, so we don't need this one. We don't need the includes because that's also about grouped statements. Then here it's important all the statements, or before all the statements, we should check which of these statements it is. And as I said, the simple statements we don't need to state explicitly. Now, the only thing we have here is statement 3. I think we also want to have this an optional statement like here. Maybe you actually also want to make it a repeated statement. I'm thinking about now, right? So we can actually several of these. That's different from what we had there, but that's what we want to make maybe. Now, the statement order is already, because it's 0, 1, 2, 3. If you just sort it alphabetically, that's already fine. So we're not going to specify it explicitly. Then here, we need to specify all the placeholders. Let's start from idea. So that's going to be a local resource. We want it to be introduced in the namespace of the Nano application, right? Each Nano application being published will mint a new identifier for that. Okay. I think we also want it to be an introduced resource. That's just a bit of documentation, right? So it is the thing the Nano publication introduces, right? Its purpose of the Nano application is to introduce that identifier of this idea. Okay. Then we had the name. So the name should just be a literal placeholder. So to type some text. Then we have the description. And the description, I think we can make it a long literal placeholder. So to give a bit more room to describe the idea. And then we have the see also link. I think that should just be a URI as we had it before. Okay. Now we could do possible values, but we didn't have a restricted or guided placeholder, so that doesn't apply here. And also not this one, and also not this one. But then here come the labels. They're important. So let's go through them one by one. So here, the text that we add is what will show up in this text field before we fill it in, right? So that's the idea one. So here we have short name used as URI suffix. I think we can do the same. Short name used as URI suffix. That I think explains it relatively well. Then we have type. So also is a. So also that we have to specify. So type should be labeled is a. That's a good one. Then the actual class here is now the idea itself. So that is where do you have it? This. So I'm say is an idea. Actually, yeah. Well, if you make it is an idea, well, in this case, it will be like that. I don't think the I've implemented that the tool would handle this a bit smartly, depending on, like, knowing a little bit of English grammar. But let's do it like that. Is an idea. So when we introduce something to be an idea, then is called. So that's the name. I'm not sure whether you say is called. We could also say. So that's this one. Yeah. Has the name would be another way to do it. I don't know. We'll see which one, whether it looks good. Then the next one is the description. We can also say has its description. And then what is still missing? Let's have another look. And then the see also. See also. We say has further information at, and that should be all. Let's see, do we have anyone that I've missed? I think, oh yeah, we have, of course, this one also, the link itself, and here, these also. So we need also the name itself. So the order here doesn't matter. It's going to be automatically sorted anyway, but the name, we're going to say here, a name given to the idea, and then the description we also need to cover, a description of the idea, and then the see also link, a link where more information can be found. Good. Then the prefixes and regular expressions. I don't think you need that. And then provenance, we keep it simple, that also. And so then we can actually publish that. Let's have a quick look. Well, we'll see. We're going to be reminded if something is wrong. So that's also a slight, or actually quite an important shortcoming still of Nanobench. You cannot really try it out and see whether it works without publishing. So the way how it goes is you have to publish, and then you see whether it works. So the publication worked. So it means there was nothing that was meant to be mandatory not filled in, or we correctly filled in the template. But well, it could still be that the form doesn't show up exactly how you wanted it to have. Now, if you go here again, it might take a bit before it shows up here in my channel as an application. So here it is actually. So that's good. But now I want it here. It doesn't show up here yet because we have to do here refresh list at the very bottom. So that's also something that could be a bit more intuitive. And now it already shows up. It typically shows the most recent ones first. So here we see on the channel introducing a new idea. Now let's see whether that actually gives us a nice thing. Oh, we made a mistake. We see now. Somehow this one is not a placeholder, so it doesn't allow us to fill in anything in. It's just we wanted it to be such that I could fill it in. I think I did not label it as a URI placeholder as well, which I mentioned earlier was important if we want to do it, but now I didn't do it. Otherwise, I think it looks pretty good. So now let's go to an application here, and let's update it. So I can here update because I was the one who created it. So I have the public key that's also stated here, so that's why I can update. Let's go here and let's have a look. So where was that? Here, right. I did not say that idea was also supposed to be a URI placeholder. Okay, let's add that. I think that's right. And then I need to republish. You see here down here, don't remove that one. It says it supersedes the previous one, right? So that's how updates are possible. Okay, let's go here. You need to, again, do refresh list. And let's see whether it is already picked up. Yeah, it is. And now it looks like that. That doesn't look too bad, right? The idea, we can see, okay, it's the Wikidata part. So now let's think of what an idea could we do. We could, for example, say argumentation with nano publications. Maybe say nanopub for arguments. And description, we could use nano publications to structure arguments on the web such that we could automatically aggregate them and apply argumentation theories. Okay, just more or less make it up now, but I think it's actually a good idea. Okay, we could have further information. I don't have that. I'll attribute that to myself, and we can now publish that. And this is now just happened to shortly show up in my channel. Let's have a look. Yeah, here it is already. So you can go here. You can also, if you want to go kind of to the way, now here it's not yet. So it was published somewhere, but maybe not on this server. And just a second later it has, right? So do you see how this, it was now already published somewhere, and a query service has already picked it up, because otherwise I wouldn't have seen it in my channel, but it was not fully in the network yet. But now it is. And now you see that I published here this nano publication very easily by just filling in this template, right? So the tough part was actually to do the template. You see down here, there's actually a link to the template. If you go here, it will point to this nano publication that I just published before I started to fill in the template. So that's how these templates work. I hope you got the idea. Feel free to define your own templates. If you don't want to start afresh, you can also just go to one and like pick also even a simple one, like for example commenting on something, right? And then you can go here, and it's a bit slow, I don't know why. And then you can click, so you don't have all these options if you do it on a nano publication you didn't create, but you have this edit as derived nano publication. So that's maybe the easiest. Then you can change the parts you want to change. You can keep this, or you can also remove it, and so not state that it was derived. You change the parts you want to change, you publish it, and then it will show up here. And if you no longer like it, make kind of realize that it was silly, or you don't want it to show up anymore, then of course you can always update it, or you can also retract it. So you go here, you do retract, you retract. I'm not going to retract this one now, but then it will also no longer show up here. So that's it. That's I think the most powerful and most exciting part of Nanobench. I hope you found it useful. I understand this is a bit more complicated part, and the user interface is not yet in all respects as advanced as I want it to be, but I hope you find it useful enough to get started on your own. Okay, so thank you for watching, and the last video will look into how we can now access these nano publications from the query services. So I hope to see you over there. Goodbye.